Yesterday we talked about the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And in phase 2, persons were quarantined. And generally when they were quarantined, they were at home and they stayed inside and they only get sunlight through the window, and that doesn't count for vitamin D. And then also many thought that fresh air is fresher indoors than it is outside. So we need to discuss some of these things. We know that sunlight enters or shines on your skin, and your skin converts the hormone vitamin D to vitamin D3, and we know that vitamin D3 is the lipid soluble, and it can directly go into the nucleus of the cell and can regulate the transcription of genes. In other words, it can affect the genes. And we know that the genes are not changed, but the expression of the genes change in regard to observing all the natural remedies. And so even if we've inherited a bad gene, the expression of that can change, and we may not ever get the disease that our parents gave us. Genes. Slide 2. Okay. Slide 2. We have a study in regard to acute respiratory tract infections and vitamin D, and there was a study of 11,000 patients, and this was prior studies, and they do what is a reanalysis of prior studies, and the prior studies were grouped, and an analysis was performed. That's what's called meta-analysis. The results are those that with less than 25 nanomoles blood level of vitamin D had a 70% risk reduction in risk. Now, the normals normally are like 30 to 60 nanomoles when you measure in the vitamin D. That's 25 hydroxy vitamin D. And in this study, those that had 25 nanomoles or greater had a 30% reduction in risk. And the dose that they used here was 800 international units. Many times, some doctors are recommending 2,000 international units a day, and 50,000 units per week. But in this study, only 800 international units was associated with the largest change. And also, you go ahead, have you thinking you're deficient in vitamin D, you just can't take like a dose you took for something to prevent cold or something. To be consistent every day to make a difference. Slide 3. The recommendation meta-analysis was you should get vitamin D, get more sunlight, or take vitamin supplementations. And like I said, be taken daily to make a difference. Immediate stat doses do not work. And slide 4. There was a study and 47% of all adults over 85 are deficient, and 27% of adults over 7 estimated deficient, and 1 in 8 adults over 50 are deficient the year. And only 4% of men and 15% of women were taking a vitamin D supplement. Now, Ireland is up lower than West Virginia. in the latitude. And it makes a difference on the latitude in regard to how much vitamin D you get. Now, sunlight has ultraviolet light. There's different types of ultraviolet light. The type light is a low frequency, and most of it comes to the Earth. It's medium frequency, and only a comes to the Earth. Type C is high frequency, and very little comes to Earth. And now slide 6. There's a study of a new tool to control spread of airborne-mediated microbial diseases. The study captured virus particles from persons that are sneezing, and the virus particles were cultured, and they subjected these to the far UVC light. This is type C one that is very little comes to the Earth. The conclusion was the far UVC light inactivated the virus particles, but this therapy is not yet approved by FDA. But there are some experimental are using this to sterilize rooms in hospitals, even though it's not FDA approved yet. There was some studies there were some studies that were analyzed by the Department of Homeland Security, and they came with some conclusions regarding COVID-19. The virus lives longer at low humidity and inactivates faster at high humidity. In other words, what we discussed yesterday in Ritter hyperthermia in moist area, it actually inactivates it faster in that sort of in hydrotherapy. Virus lives longer at low temperatures and inactivates faster as the temperature increases. We know that sunlight destroys the virus quickly, and the risk of transmission from surfaces outdoors is lowered during sunlight because the sunlight has destroyed some of the virus. Higher temperature and humidity of indoor environments will reduce viral contamination on surfaces. What is at risk is low humidity environments such as aircraft cabins, and people are at increased risk. And I guess that's why people are not flying as much as they used to. Slide 8. Okay. This is COVID-2, which is the COVID-19 SARS, and this is the solar intensity and the half-life of the COVID-19 or the COVID-2 SARS. And with full intensity of sunlight, it only lasts, the half-life is only 2 minutes. Half intensity, 3 minutes. Of fourth intensity, 4 minutes. And light, and in total darkness, there is no decay. You know that in creation, the first day, he created light. Light is important. Now, slide 9. These are the summary regarding sunlight. Sunlight or dietary supplementation of vitamin D is important, especially if you're low and have a deficiency. Vitamin D is important in preventing respiratory infections, based on the study that I gave you, and the far UVC light may allow us to significantly reduce aerosolized emission, and heat and humidity speed up the breakdown of SARS-CoV-2. Now, slide 10. Most white people spend about a half hour in the summer sun in bathing. Most people that do this, not most people do this, but most white people who spend a half an hour in summer sun in a bathing suit where they get more exposure to this, to the skin, can produce a release of 50,000 international units of vitamin D into the circulation within 24 hours of the exposure. In a tan person, only 20,000 to 30,000 international units are released. And in a dark-skinned person, only 8,000 to 10,000 international units. I'm given the reference here. Slide 11. There is some vitamin D in depression. Where this, we know Seattle, Washington had depression than Dallas, Texas. Blood levels in 18 to 65-year-old persons were found to be lower in persons with current or it should be current or remitted depression relative to controls. There was a study of 185 undergraduate healthy college women, and more than one third had depressive symptoms, and almost one half had vitamin D deficiency, and depressive symptoms were predicted by the vitamin D levels. Low vitamin D levels are associated with clinically significant symptoms of depression in otherwise healthy individuals. That was the conclusion of this study. Now, slide 12. Vitamin D in the brain. We know about several levels that actually help in depression. And we know that vitamin D regulates serotonin levels by means of transcriptional activation of tryptophan hydroxylate, which is the basic. It is a tryptophan is a protein that we take from food, and it can change this tryptophan hydroxylate gene. As I said in the first slide, the vitamin D can get into the nucleus and is liposoluble, and it can change the transcription of genes. Slide 13. Now, we're going to talk about fresh air. There was a study published in Preventive Medicine 2007, February, that they found out that healthy lifestyles are associated with the higher levels of porphyrin, granulysin, and granzymes A and B. These are proteins released by human killer cells. The porphyrin and granulosin are proteins. The granzyme is a family of proteases stored in cytotoxic lymphocytes. These are part of that immune system that will fight off both viruses and bacteria. And so they had a study of 114 males from a large company in Japan, and they were divided into three groups in regard to lifestyle. And they based this on cigarette use, alcohol use, sleeping hours, working hours, physical exercise, eating breakfast, having balanced nutrition, and whether or not they had mental stress. Slide 14. Blood samples were taken and analyzed. The results were good, and the ones in the good and moderate healthy lifestyles had significantly more natural killer cells than the poor health group. Slide 15. We have another study where they had 12 healthy men and they put them into two groups. One, they called it a forest bather. In other words, they went out and were in the forest with the trees, and then there were city dwellers who stayed in the city. And the forest bather group was taken to the forest, and the other group remained in the city. And they did baseline and daily blood samples of the granulosin, performin, and granulozyme A and B. They also took urinary adrenaline. Urinary adrenaline was an indicator of the stress levels. The forest bather group slept in the forest and walked 2.5 kilometers daily. The results were in the forest bather group, blood levels increased daily and urine levels of this adrenaline went down daily, whereas there were changes in the city group. And I've given you the reference at the bottom. Now, slide 16. There was another study of there's a chemical that comes from trees called phytonicide, and it has to do with the human natural killer cell function. 12 healthy medical students in Tokyo were the subjects, and they measured baseline and daily blood levels of performin, granulosin, granulozyme A and B, and also daily urinary adrenaline. And they also measured the chemical that was in from the trees. Photonicides, that's what it is, photonicides. And at 7 p.m., they inhaled vaporized oil from trees, and the result was blood increased and urinary adrenaline. There was no change, and these were they remained in a city, but then they inhaled this vaporized photonicide from oil from trees. Slide 17. There was some publication regarding exposure to air pollution and COVID-19 mortality in the United States, and this was published on April 5 of this year. They investigated whether long-term exposure to fine particulate matter increases the risk of COVID-19 deaths in the United States, and the data was collected from 3,000 counties. The results found that an increase of only 1 microgram per meter squared in this PM2.5, which was a fine particulate matter, was associated with a 15% increase in COVID-19 deaths. Slide 18. We know about melatonin, which comes from it's a pineal gland hormone, and it's a key pace setter for many of the body's circadian rhythms. Melatonin plays an important role in countering infection, inflammation, cancer, and autoimmunity. Melatonin suppresses the UV radiation damage that you get from sun exposure. When a person is exposed to sunlight or very bright artificial light in the morning, their nocturnal melatonin production occurs sooner, and they enter into sleep more easily at night. Slide 19. The melatonin rhythm phase advancement caused by bright morning light, effective against insomnia, premenstrual syndrome, and seasonal affective disorder. Moderately high serotonin levels result in more positive moods and a calm yet focused mental outlook. Now we know that melatonin can help increase the serotonin levels, as we discussed previously. Mammalian skin can produce serotonin and transform it into melatonin, and many types of skin cells express receptors for both serotonin and melatonin. Now, slide 20. With our modern day tendency for indoor activity up well past dusk results in poor melatonin production. It is important that people who work indoors get outside periodically and try sleeping in total darkness. This can have a major impact on melatonin rhythms and can result in improvement in mood, energy, and sleep quality. And slide 21. Increasing melatonin and improving depression. There was a study of 89 men and women over 60 who were randomly assigned to one of two groups, the light therapy group and no light therapy group. After 3 weeks of light therapy, the light therapy group had depression scores that dropped 50%. Now there was a study done regarding reading books by screen and reading books by the book itself. And this is like an iPad or a computer. During the 2-week study, the participants read electronic books before bedtime, and then the study was repeated with printed books before bedtime. The results were those reading on screens were less sleepy in the evening and took longer to fall asleep. Screen readers had reduced levels of melatonin because they measured their melatonin. Blue glow emitted for Kindle and iPads can disrupt circadian rhythms. There was a lower amount of REM sleep and reduced alertness. There's also a study done of negative air ions. These are generated from radiant and cosmic rays in the atmosphere, from lightning and from sharing of water and from plant sources such as evergreen trees. There was a study where subjects were exposed to negative air ions, and it showed increased performance of all tasks: mirror reading, rotary pursuit, visual reaction time, and auditory tests. The negative air ions alleviated symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, mood disorders, comparable to, and the negative ions were comparable to antidepressants and can be used to treat chronic depression without the use of these chemical antidepressants. Slide 24. The conclusion is that fresh, pure, unpolluted air is essential for good health and longevity, and sunlight is very important for good health and longevity, but in moderation. These studies about the city dwellers and the forest dwellers could give some people an incentive to maybe move to the country, or if they live in the city, they should periodically go to the country to get exposure to sunlight and good pure air, and also trees that convert carbon dioxide to oxygen.